The Premier League today is a global juggernaut, watched by billions, headlined by super managers like Pep Guardiola, Mikel Arteta and Arne Slot. But cast your mind back to 1992, when it all began. No VAR, no billionaire owners, just 22 clubs, a brand new league, and a group of managers who'd go down in history as the very first to lead their teams into this new era. Some were legends in the making, others were already past their peak, and a few faded into obscurity. From title winners and TV pundits to global wanderers and total vanishing acts, this is the story of the Premier League's original 22 managers, and where they are now. When the Premier League kicked off in 1992, George Graham was the man at the Arsenal helm. Known for his rigid, disciplined 1-0 to the Arsenal approach, Graham had already delivered 2 league titles, a League Cup, and the famous 1989 last-minute title win at Anfield. But his time at the club ended in controversy in 1995, when he was sacked after it emerged he'd accepted an illegal payment from an agent during a transfer deal. It tarnished his legacy, but not irreparably. After serving a 1-year ban from football, Graham returned to management with Leeds United in 1996, guiding them to a UEFA Cup place. He then made a highly controversial move to Arsenal's North London rivals, Tottenham Hotspur, in 1998. He won the League Cup in 1999, but never fully won over the Spurs faithful, due to his Gunners' history. He was sacked in 2001 as the club moved in a different direction. Post-management, Graham became a regular pundit on Sky Sports and in newspapers. Over time, fans began to remember his achievements more than his fall from grace. While Arsene Wenger changed Arsenal's identity completely, Graham's grit and steel still earn respect, especially from fans who lived through the late 80s and early 90s. Now in retirement, and largely away from the spotlight, George Graham is one of those managers whose career had both glory and scandal. But make no mistake, he helped lay the modern foundations at Arsenal, and that 1989 title moment remains one of the most iconic in English football history. Ron Atkinson, known by all as Big Ron, was never short on personality. And when the Premier League era kicked off, he was riding high with a talented Aston Villa side. In the league's inaugural season, Villa finished second to Manchester United, and Atkinson was hailed for getting the best out of players like Dean Saunders and Dalglish Atkinson. He followed that up by winning the League Cup in 1994, but inconsistency saw him sacked later that year. He moved on to Coventry City and then had a short second stint at Sheffield Wednesday, before hanging his managerial hat up with Nottingham Forest. As his managerial career started to wind down, Atkinson transitioned seamlessly into punditry. With his tan, gold jewelry and memorable one-liners, he became a fixture on ITV and other UK broadcasters throughout the 1990s. But his media career came to an abrupt and ignominious end in 2004, when he made a racist comment live on air, unaware his microphone was still on. The backlash was immediate, and he was forced to resign from all his punditry roles. It was a fall from grace that essentially ended his involvement in mainstream football. In recent years, Atkinson has popped up occasionally in the media. He spent time with Swindon Town in an advisory role as part of an obscure football reality TV show, and then briefly served as director of football at non-league club Kettering Town. He later appeared on reality TV shows such as Celebrity Big Brother, but these days limits his appearances to Manchester United TV. His legacy is complex, a charismatic and successful manager in his prime, but ultimately overshadowed by a number of damaging comments that he has made throughout his media career. For Villa fans though, that 1992-93 title challenge remains a fond memory, and Big Ron was the man behind it. When the Premier League era kicked off in 1992, Kenny Dalglish was deep into his next footballing project, building something special at Blackburn Rovers. Already a legend from his playing and managerial days at Liverpool, Dalglish had taken over at Blackburn in 1991 when they were still a second division side. Backed by the financial muscle of Jack Walker, he led them to promotion and into the top flight just in time for the Premier League's inaugural season. While Blackburn finished fourth in that first campaign, he wasn't done. With Alan Shearer spearheading the attack, he built a side capable of taking on the Giants, and in the 94-95 season, they did just that. Against all odds, Blackburn Rovers were crowned Premier League champions, beating Manchester United to the title on the final day. It remains one of English football's greatest underdog triumphs. Rather than continue, Dalglish chose to move upstairs, becoming director of football before eventually leaving the club. He later had a short-lived stint at Newcastle United and returned to Celtic in a brief and uneasy spell as caretaker manager and director of football. But in 2011, after years out of the game, he made an emotional return to Liverpool, taking over during a turbulent period. He won the League Cup in 2012 and steadied the ship after Roy Hodgson's departure, but inconsistent league form saw him dismissed at the end of the season. Since then, Dalglish has remained a beloved figure at Anfield, knighted for his services to football and charity, and still active as an ambassador. For Liverpool and Blackburn fans alike, he's remembered not just as a great manager, but as a class act and a symbol of football done right. A quiet icon, but one whose legacy echoes loud. Ian Porterfield might not be a household name today, but back in 1992, he was in the hot seat at Chelsea during a pivotal transitional period. A former player best known for scoring Sunderland's winner in the 1973 FA Cup final, Porterfield had carved out a solid coaching career by the time he took over at Stamford Bridge in 1991. When the Premier League launched, Chelsea were nowhere near the powerhouse they'd eventually become. This was a pre-Abramovich, pre-Mourinho era, mid-table ambition, modest crowds, and a team filled with honest pros rather than global stars. Porterfield guided Chelsea to a respectable 14th place finish in his first season, but results began to slide the following year. By February 1993, he became the very first manager to be sacked in Premier League history. After Chelsea, Porterfield's managerial journey took a truly global turn. He became something of a football nomad, managing clubs and national teams across the world. He had stints in Zambia, Saudi Arabia, Zimbabwe, Oman, and Trinidad and Tobago, among others. Wherever he went, he earned respect for taking on challenging roles and working with limited resources. He was the very definition of a journeyman coach, someone willing to go anywhere the game took him. In 2006, Porterfield took over as manager of the Armenian national team and was beginning to make progress when tragedy struck. In 2007, he passed away from colon cancer at the age of 61, still in post. His death was mourned across multiple continents, a reflection of the legacy he'd built far beyond English shores. While his time at Chelsea may have been brief, Ian Porterfield's impact on world football, especially in developing nations, was profound. A true football man who gave everything to the game, right until the very end. Bobby Gould is one of English football's true old-school characters, a manager with a strong personality, an eye for an underdog story, and a career filled with twists. When the Premier League era kicked off in 1992, Gould was in charge of Coventry City. It was his second stint managing the Sky Blues, and true to form, it was anything but dull. Coventry made a flying start to the inaugural Premier League season, even topping the table briefly in the early months. But as the campaign wore on, form tailed off, and tensions behind the scenes bubbled up. Gould was never afraid of speaking his mind, a quality that could both inspire and divide. He stepped down late in the season, passing the baton to Don Howe, and Coventry narrowly avoided relegation. In 1995, Gould was appointed manager of the Wales national team, a job that proved challenging from day one. His direct approach and man management style caused friction with some of the squad's senior players, including Mark Hughes. Although he wasn't able to lead Wales to a major tournament, he did oversee the rise of younger talent and stayed in the role for 4 years. After his time with Wales, Gould had short spells in club management. He briefly took charge of Cardiff City in 2000s, and later managed Cheltenham Town and non-league side Weymouth. These roles didn't bring much success, but they reflected his love for being involved in the game at any level. In more recent years, Gould became a regular voice on TalkSport, where his humor, honesty, and wealth of stories made him a fan favorite. He remains a larger-than-life figure, never far from a strong opinion, a good laugh, or a football anecdote. Steve Coppell was just 37 years old and already a well-respected manager at Crystal Palace. He'd led them to their highest-ever league finish, third in 1991, and taken them to an FA Cup final. But when Palace were relegated in the inaugural Premier League season, cruelly, on goal difference, Coppell resigned, citing burnout and the mental toll of top-flight management. He returned to Palace in 1995 for a second spell, before moving to Manchester City in 1996. His time at City was brief, just 33 days as he shockingly resigned, citing stress and pressure. Honest and self-aware, it was a rare move in football, but one that earned him respect. In 1997, he went back to Palace again, this time as director of football during the club's turbulent Goldberg ownership era. When that went south, Coppell returned to the dugout in 1998, overseeing yet another relegation, and then staying on through financial chaos and administration. He remained loyal until 2000s, guiding them to safety on the final day. He took over at Brentford for the 2001-2002 season and led them to the brink of promotion from the second division, only narrowly missing out. That led to a move to Brighton in 2002, although he was unable to stave off relegation to the third tier. Coppell's golden chapter came at Reading. Appointed in 2003, he led them to 106 points and promotion to the Premier League in 2006, still a record for the Championship. In their debut Premier League season, Reading stunned everyone by finishing 8th. He left in 2009 after relegation the year before. He had a short-lived managerial stint at Bristol City, stepping down after just 2 games. He then worked as director of football at Crawley Town, helping steady the club during its rapid rise through the leagues. And in 2013, he took on a similar role with Portsmouth. Later, Coppell embraced the global game, moving to the Indian Super League, where he managed Kerala Blasters, Jamshedpur FC, and ATK between 2016 and 2018, introducing his calm, thoughtful style to a growing football audience. Now retired from management, Steve Coppell remains one of the game's understated legends, loyal, methodical, and respected. Palace fans cherish his unwavering service, and Reading fans will always remember the glory years. Howard Kendall was already a bona fide Everton legend by the time the Premier League launched in 1992. As a manager, he delivered the club's greatest ever era in the 1980s, 2 league titles, an FA Cup, and the 1985 European Cup Winners' Cup. But the Kendall who started the Premier League era was in his second spell at the club, and the magic of the first had faded. The 92-93 season saw Everton struggle under Kendall. The club finished 13th, far from their former glory, and tensions with the board and fans began to grow. He resigned in December 1993, unhappy with a lack of financial backing and frustrated with the club's direction. For a man who had once built the most dominant team in England, it was a sad exit. He didn't disappear from the game though. After Everton, Kendall had brief managerial spells at Xanthi in Greece, Notts County and Sheffield United, but the spark wasn't quite there anymore. He even returned to Everton yet again for a third time in 1997, this time to help the club avoid relegation. He succeeded, but left at the end of the 97-98 season, marking the end of his managerial career in English football. Though he never found long-term success after his first Everton spell, Kendall remained a respected figure in the game, and a near-mythical one at Goodison Park. He wrote columns, gave interviews, and was a regular guest at Everton matches, maintaining close ties to the club he loved. Sadly, Howard Kendall passed away in 2015, aged 69. Everton fans paid tribute in huge numbers, remembering not just a great manager, but one of their own. A man who delivered greatness and never stopped caring about the club. For Blues everywhere, Kendall will always be the heartbeat of their golden era. By the time the Premier League era kicked off in 1992, John Lyall was already considered one of English football's most respected managerial figures. Best known for his long and successful tenure at West Ham United, Lyall had led the Hammers to 2 FA Cup wins and their highest ever league finish in 1986. A man of dignity and quiet authority, he was now trying to repeat the magic at Ipswich Town. Lyall had taken Ipswich up from the second division in 1991, laying the groundwork for their return to the top flight. The first Premier League season saw them finish a solid 16th. Not spectacular, but survival was the goal. In the following campaign, however, things began to unravel. Results dipped, and the team struggled. Lyall stepped down in December 1994, just months before Ipswich suffered a brutal relegation. After leaving Ipswich, Lyall bought a farm in Suffolk and quietly retired from frontline management. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he didn't seek media work, nor did he bounce around clubs looking for one last job. He stayed largely out of the spotlight, occasionally offering advice or scouting insight, but he was never one to chase attention. His legacy, especially at West Ham, remained untouchable. A proper football man, Lyall was admired by players and peers for his calm manner, tactical intelligence, and unwavering loyalty. At a time when management was becoming more media-driven, Lyall represented the old guard, understated but highly effective. John Lyall passed away in 2006, aged 66, after suffering a heart attack. He's still remembered with deep affection by West Ham and Ipswich fans alike, not just for the trophies or the promotions, but for the way he carried himself. Howard Wilkinson might not be a headline magnet today, but he holds a distinction no one else in the modern era can claim. He's still the last English manager to win the top-flight title, and that alone earns him a permanent seat in football history. Wilkinson took over Leeds United in 1988, with the club languishing in the old second division. He immediately set about rebuilding them with a clear plan, structure, discipline, and smart recruitment. In just 2 years, he led Leeds to promotion, winning the second division title in 1990. But he wasn't done. In only their second season back in the top flight, Wilkinson delivered the 1991-92 First Division title, ahead of Sir Alex Ferguson's Manchester United, Leeds' first top flight title in 18 years. He built that side around a rock-solid spine: John Lukic, Gary McAllister, Gordon Strachan, David Batty, and a young Gary Speed. It was old-school English management done right. But when the Premier League era began in 1992, Leeds failed to carry their momentum forward. They finished 17th, without a single away win, and the glory days quickly began to fade. Wilkinson stayed on, trying to refresh the squad, but by 1996, after a poor start and pressure mounting from fans and the board, he was sacked. After Leeds, Wilkinson entered national service. In 1999, he briefly served as caretaker England manager, and from 1999 to 2001, he coached the England under-21 team, helping guide the next generation. In 2000s, he also stepped in for one game as caretaker of the senior England team, securing a win over Finland. In 2002, he returned to the dugout with Sunderland, but couldn't prevent the slide and was sacked in 2003. Later that year, he went international, managing Shanghai Shenhua in China. Back in England in 2004, he joined Leicester City as first-team coach, then became a non-executive director at Notts County the same year. From 2009 to 2011, he served as technical advisor at Sheffield Wednesday, his former club. Off the pitch, Wilkinson has also led the League Managers Association, advocating for managers' rights and development. He may not have the media profile of some of his contemporaries, but Wilkinson's legacy is immense: a title winner, a developer of talent, and a man who helped shape the modern structure of English football. Graeme Souness stepped into the Liverpool job in 1991, following in the footsteps of giants like Bob Paisley and Kenny Dalglish. A club legend as a player, Souness had returned from a successful spell managing Rangers, hoping to bring a modern edge to Liverpool. But as the Premier League launched in 1992, Souness found himself caught between eras, trying to rebuild a fading dynasty, while English football transformed around him. He introduced a host of new players and aimed to shift out the old guard, but not all his signings hit the mark. Behind the scenes, his hardline style ruffled feathers, and his decision to sell his story to the Sun, just years after Hillsborough, sparked outrage from Liverpool fans. Despite some talent coming through, results dipped, and after an FA Cup defeat to Bristol City, Souness resigned in January 1994. He bounced back abroad, managing Galatasaray, where he famously planted a giant club flag in the middle of Fenerbahçe's pitch, a move that made him a cult hero in Turkey. Back in England, he took over at Southampton in 1996, a reign that's best remembered for the most bizarre moment in Premier League history: signing Ali Dia, a man who bluffed his way into the squad by pretending to be George Weah's cousin. Dia played just 53 minutes before being subbed off. It's become football folklore. Souness later managed Torino, Benfica, and then Blackburn Rovers, where he redeemed himself by winning the League Cup in 2002, beating Spurs in the final. He went on to manage Newcastle United, though his old-school approach clashed with modern egos. Since stepping away from management, Souness has become one of football's most recognizable pundits, known for his blunt honesty, fiery takes, and sharp suits. After leaving Sky Sports in 2023, he's continued work with TNT Sports and raised thousands for heart charities. Love him or loathe him, Souness is pure box office, a man who played and managed with grit, fire, and zero tolerance for nonsense. When the Premier League era kicked off, Peter Reid was juggling one of football's most demanding double acts. He was player-manager at Manchester City, a proper throwback move in an era already turning modern. He guided City to a respectable 9th-place finish in that first Premier League season, and as someone who'd won titles with Everton as a player, his no-nonsense, workmanlike approach suited the club well. But after a poor start to the following campaign, Reid was sacked in August 1993, and City never really recovered from that decision for years to come. Reid, still itching to play, laced up his boots again post-City. He had short spells as a player with Southampton, Notts County, and Bury between 1993 and 1995, finally calling time on a long playing career. He returned to the dugout in 1995 with Sunderland, and it was there he truly made his mark. He took them to the Premier League in 1996, and after a brief drop, brought them back in style with a record 105-point First Division season in 1999. He then oversaw back-to-back 7th-place finishes, making Sunderland a tough, respected top-flight outfit. His partnership with Niall Quinn and the goals of Kevin Phillips defined that era. After Sunderland, he had shorter spells in charge of Leeds United, Coventry City, and Plymouth Argyle. And in 2008, he took the Thailand national team job. He later managed Mumbai City FC in the Indian Super League. Off the touchline, Reid also worked behind the scenes. He joined the coaching staff at Stoke City, and later at Bolton Wanderers, bringing his experience and grit to support roles in the background. Now, a regular face in the media and a great storyteller, Peter Reid is remembered as a hard-as-nails midfielder and a passionate, no-frills manager who led with heart, especially in the eyes of Sunderland fans who still sing his name. When the Premier League launched, Alex Ferguson was already feeling the heat. 6 years into the Manchester United job, he'd won domestic cups but still hadn't delivered a league title. That all changed in the league's inaugural season. With the arrival of Eric Cantona and the rise of players like Ryan Giggs, United ended a 26-year title drought, and Ferguson finally had liftoff. What followed was nothing short of sporting domination. Ferguson built and rebuilt squads that conquered England and Europe. From the class of '92 to the treble winners of 1999 to the Ronaldo-Rooney-Tevez era, Ferguson's fingerprints were all over modern Manchester United. He won 13 Premier League titles, 5 FA Cups, 4 League Cups, 2 Champions Leagues and countless other honours, including that unforgettable treble in '99, which went unmatched by any English club until Manchester City 24 years later. He wasn't just successful, he was ruthless. He reinvented himself constantly, never afraid to sell a big name, shake up his coaching staff, or back youth over reputation. He turned United into a global machine and left a legacy no one has come close to matching. Ferguson retired in 2013, going out on a high after winning one last league title. He moved into a role as club ambassador and boardroom director, remaining close to the club he helped define. But in 2024, he was controversially removed from his ambassador role by new owner Sir Jim Ratcliffe in a cost-cutting overhaul. The move shocked fans and divided opinion. Many saw it as a disrespectful end to a towering figure's official connection to the club. Despite that, Ferguson remains a symbol of United's golden age, a giant of the game whose presence still looms large at Old Trafford. For United fans, and even rivals, there'll never be another like him. He wasn't just part of the Premier League, he defined it. Lennie Lawrence isn't a flashy name, but he's one of English football's great unsung servants, a man who's seen it all. When the Premier League launched in 1992, he was managing Middlesbrough, having already led the club up from the second division in 1992. Borough were punching above their weight under Lawrence, but in that tough inaugural Premier League season, they just couldn't stay afloat, finishing 21st and going straight back down. Lawrence stayed with Borough until 1994, laying the groundwork for the Robson-Gaza-Ravanelli era that would follow. From there, he entered his journeyman phase, managing Bradford City, Luton Town, Grimsby Town, and Cardiff City, where he won promotion from Division 2 in 2003, helping push the club toward championship-level ambitions. In the years that followed, Lawrence took on a more low-key but crucial role in the game, becoming a trusted assistant and technical advisor. He worked at Bristol Rovers, Carshalton Athletic, and Hereford United before working as assistant to Dougie Freedman at Crystal Palace. He stepped in as caretaker manager when Freedman departed, but would eventually follow him to both Bolton Wanderers and Nottingham Forest. Lawrence returned to Cardiff in 2016 as assistant manager, but left the following year. He later had advisory roles with both Newport County and Stevenage, but when it looked like he might finally settle into retirement, Lawrence made a shock return to frontline football in November 2024, when he was appointed manager of Hartlepool United at the age of 76, making him one of the oldest managers ever in English professional football. But after a turbulent start and shifting priorities, in February 2025, he stepped down and switched roles with his assistant Anthony Limbrick, becoming assistant manager and transitioning into a non-executive director role to support the club off the pitch. Mike Walker might not be one of the most recognizable names from the early Premier League era, but for a brief, glorious moment, he was the mastermind behind one of the most remarkable underdog stories the league has ever seen. When the 1992-93 season kicked off, Walker's Norwich City were widely tipped for relegation. By the end of it, they'd finished third, behind only Manchester United and Aston Villa, and ahead of heavyweights like Blackburn, Arsenal, and Liverpool. Walker's side played progressive, attacking football. With the likes of Chris Sutton, Royle Fox and Brian Gunn, they didn't just survive, they dazzled. The following season, he led Norwich into Europe for the first time, famously defeating Bayern Munich in the UEFA Cup, still the only English team to beat Bayern at the Olympic Stadium. For a club of Norwich's size, it was a dream. But in January 1994, Walker shocked everyone by walking away, lured by the challenge and bigger budget of managing Everton. Unfortunately, things didn't go to plan. Despite saving them from relegation that season, Walker's time at Goodison was short-lived. He struggled to impose his style and was sacked after less than a year. Walker returned to Norwich in 1996, but the magic was gone. The club was now in the second tier and in decline, and he couldn't recapture the success of his first spell. He was dismissed in 1998. Since then, Walker has largely kept a low profile, stepping away from football management altogether. He hasn't been involved in senior roles since the late 1990s, choosing to enjoy a quieter life out of the spotlight. But for Norwich fans, Mike Walker remains a legend, the man who took them to Europe, beat Bayern Munich, and dared to dream big in the very first Premier League season. Brian Clough wasn't just a football manager, he was a force of nature. By the time the Premier League arrived in 1992, Clough was already a legend. He'd turned Derby County and Nottingham Forest into title winners, and famously led Forest to back-to-back European Cups in 1979 and 1980. His charisma, wit, arrogance and brilliance made him one of the most captivating figures in football history. But the inaugural Premier League season would be his last, and it ended in heartbreak. The 1992-93 campaign saw Clough's Nottingham Forest, once kings of Europe, relegated from the top flight. A shadow of the dominant side he'd built in the late 70s and 80s, Forest were undone by a mix of poor signings, loss of key players like Teddy Sheringham, and perhaps just maybe, a manager whose magic had finally started to fade. Clough announced his retirement at the end of that season. He left the game with his health declining and his relationship with alcohol an open secret. But despite the sad ending, his status as a footballing icon never wavered. After retirement, Clough mostly stayed out of the spotlight. He published an autobiography, gave the occasional interview, always quotable, always sharp, and remained a beloved figure, especially in Nottingham. He famously reconciled with longtime assistant Peter Taylor shortly before Taylor's death, which brought emotional closure to one of football's greatest partnerships. Brian Clough passed away in 2004, aged 69, after a long battle with stomach cancer. His legacy remains untouched. Statues of him stand in Nottingham, Derby, and Middlesbrough, a rare honor and testament to his impact. They don't make them like Cloughy anymore. And as he once said, with tongue firmly in cheek, "I wouldn't say I was the best manager in the business, but I was in the top one." When the Premier League era kicked off in 1992, Joe Royle was already a top-flight veteran and a local hero at Oldham Athletic. Having taken charge in 1982, he led the Latics to the top division, an FA Cup semi-final, and into the inaugural Premier League season. His Oldham side was fearless, direct and fun to watch, and in the 1992-93 campaign, they pulled off one of the greatest escapes of all time, winning their last 3 games to avoid relegation on goal difference. The following year, though, the miracle ran out. Oldham were relegated in 1993-94, and after 12 incredible years, Royle stepped down. He quickly returned to the big stage with Everton, taking over in 1994 and pulling off another great rescue act. In 1995, he guided the Toffees to a surprise FA Cup win, beating Manchester United, and then followed it up with a 6th-place league finish, no small feat given the club's instability. He left Everton in 1997, then managed Manchester City, helping them climb from Division 2 to the Premier League in just 2 seasons. Though they were relegated again in 2001, Royle had stabilised the club at a crucial moment. He later managed Ipswich Town and had a brief return to Oldham as manager in 2009. He returned to Everton in 2016 as part of their coaching staff under caretaker boss David Unsworth, offering a steadying influence. He also served as director of football at Wigan Athletic, continuing to lend his football brain behind the scenes. Most recently, in 2022, Royle returned home once again, becoming director of football at Oldham Athletic, now in non-league. His return marked a full-circle moment for both club and manager. When the Premier League launched in 1992, Gerry Francis was one of the most impressive managers in the top flight. A former England captain known for his tactical intelligence and trademark curly mullet, Francis was in charge of Queen's Park Rangers, where he'd taken a modest squad and turned them into a well-drilled competitive force. In that inaugural Premier League season, QPR finished an astonishing 5th, above Arsenal, Chelsea and Spurs, the top London club. With Les Ferdinand banging in the goals and seasoned pros like Ray Wilkins pulling the strings, Francis earned plaudits for getting the most out of his team with limited resources. In 1994, he was snapped up by Tottenham Hotspur, where he spent 3 years trying to stabilise a club in transition. He brought organisation and structure but couldn't quite deliver European football or silverware. He was sacked in 1997 after a run of poor results. Francis then returned to QPR in 1998 for a second spell, but the club was in decline, struggling financially and on the pitch. Despite his best efforts, results didn't improve significantly, and he resigned in 2001. Later that year, he went back to where it all began, taking charge of Bristol Rovers once again. It was a romantic homecoming, but with the club now in the lower leagues and resources stretched, Francis couldn't replicate past successes and stepped down in 2002. After that, Francis became one of the most trusted lieutenants in the game, joining Tony Pulis as first-team coach at Stoke City, Crystal Palace and West Brom. He was known for his tactical detail, especially in set pieces and defensive shape, and was hugely respected by players and coaching staff alike. Now retired from coaching, Gerry Francis remains a thoughtful, admired figure, and for QPR fans, his legacy as the man who made them London's top dogs in '93 still holds strong. Dave Bassett, or Harry as everyone calls him, is one of English football's ultimate old-school characters. Direct, honest and never short of a story. When the Premier League kicked off in 1992, Bassett was in charge of Sheffield United, having taken them from the third division to the top flight in just a few seasons. He did it his way, long balls, hard graft, and team spirit by the bucket load. In that first Premier League season, Bassett's side became known for being awkward to play against and full of fight, with Brian Deane scoring the first ever Premier League goal. But the following season ended in heartbreak, as they were relegated on the final day thanks to a last-minute defeat at Chelsea. Bassett stayed on until 1995, then went on a managerial tour of Crystal Palace, Nottingham Forest, where he got them promoted in 1997-98, Barnsley, and Leicester City. He had a brief caretaker spell at Southampton in 2004, and served as assistant manager to Dennis Wise at Leeds United in 2006, adding his vast experience behind the scenes. In 2011, he returned to Sheffield United in a consultancy role, helping guide the club through another transitional period. He also worked in advisory positions and as a sounding board for several managers, including a stint alongside Brendan Rodgers at Watford. Bassett's straightforward style might not have been fashionable, but it worked. Off the pitch, he became a regular pundit and after-dinner speaker, full of sharp wit and classic dressing room tales. Now retired, Dave Bassett remains a cult hero for many. No frills, no fuss, just football passion and a track record of turning underdogs into battlers. Trevor Francis was a footballing icon long before he stepped into management. England's first £1 million player, a European Cup winner with Nottingham Forest, and a silky forward with class written all over him. By the time the Premier League launched in 1992, he was player-manager of Sheffield Wednesday, combining brains with boots at the highest level. That 1992-93 season was a real high point. Francis led Wednesday to a 7th place finish in the Premier League and took them to 2 domestic cup finals, the FA Cup and the League Cup, both against Arsenal. Unfortunately, they lost both, the FA Cup in extra time after a replay. Still, it was an incredible season, and Wednesday were a serious force under his leadership. He eventually hung up his boots and continued as full-time manager until 1995, when he was sacked following a dip in results. His next stop was Birmingham City, where he spent 6 years. He took the Blues to multiple First Division playoff campaigns and the 2001 League Cup final, which they narrowly lost on penalties to Liverpool. For a time, he had Birmingham on the brink of the Premier League. In 2001, he returned to his old club Crystal Palace as manager, but lasted just over a year. It would be his final role in management. After leaving the dugout, Francis moved into media, becoming a familiar voice on Sky Sports and ITV. Calm, analytical, and always professional, he was a respected figure on screen, never chasing controversy, just calling the game as he saw it. Tragically, Trevor Francis passed away in July 2023 at the age of 69 after suffering a heart attack. Tributes poured in from across the football world. He wasn't just the first £1 million man, he was pure class on and off the pitch. Ian Branfoot might not be the most recognisable name from the Premier League's early years, but for a time, he was right in the thick of it, leading Southampton into the brand new top flight in 1992. Known for his no-nonsense approach and emphasis on discipline and organisation, Branfoot was tasked with keeping a relatively modest Saints squad afloat in a rapidly modernising league. In that first Premier League season, Branfoot managed to steer Southampton to 18th place, just above the relegation zone, and kept them in the division. But it wasn't without criticism. Fans were frustrated by what they saw as dull, overly defensive football, especially with exciting young talents like Matt Le Tissier in the squad. Despite staying up, the pressure mounted. Branfoot was sacked midway through the 1993-94 season, replaced by Alan Ball, who brought in a more attacking style and gave Le Tissier the creative freedom he craved, something many fans felt Branfoot had stifled. After Southampton, Branfoot dropped out of the top-level spotlight. He He had a short spell managing Fulham in the lower leagues, but eventually moved away from senior management roles altogether. That's where his influence became more behind the scenes. In later years, Branfoot worked in various development and academy roles, including at clubs like Reading and Leeds United, where he focused on scouting and youth development. While he never returned to top-tier management, he carved out a reputation as a thoughtful football man with a strong eye for talent. Now long retired from football, Ian Branfoot lives a quiet life away from the spotlight. Though his managerial style was divisive, especially at Southampton, he remains part of Premier League history, and firmly one of the first managers to lead a club into a bold new era. When the Premier League launched, Tottenham Hotspur tried something bold, appointing a joint managerial team. On one side, you had Doug Livermore, a highly respected coach who'd already been part of the Spurs setup for years. On the other, Ray Clemence, the legendary Liverpool and Spurs goalkeeper, who brought a wealth of experience and calm authority. Together, they guided Spurs through the inaugural Premier League season. It wasn't spectacular, but it wasn't disastrous either. Spurs finished 8th, with Teddy Sheringham winning the Golden Boot and young talent like Nick Barmby emerging. The football was easy on the eye at times, but the shared leadership setup lacked clarity, and by the end of the season, the club moved in a new direction. After their spell in charge, both men continued in football and took very different paths. Ray Clemence briefly managed Barnet in the mid-90s before moving into a long-term role with the England national team. He became goalkeeper coach and assistant under a series of managers, including Glenn Hoddle, Kevin Keegan, Sven-Goran Eriksson, and Fabio Coppell, and was a key part of the England setup for over a decade. Universally admired for his humility and professionalism, Clemence remained a beloved figure in the game until his passing in 2020, after a long battle with prostate cancer. Doug Livermore, meanwhile, joined Liverpool as assistant to Roy Evans in 1994, helping oversee the exciting Spice Boys era, a team full of flair but one that often fell just short. He later worked as assistant manager to Nigel Worthington at both Norwich City and Leicester City, providing a steady presence in the dugout through the 2000s. After leaving the pro game, Livermore stepped away from the limelight and now lives a quiet life in retirement. While their time as joint managers at Spurs was brief, both went on to carve out important backroom careers. One became a key figure at national level, the other a trusted right-hand man at some of the biggest clubs in the country. When the Premier League kicked off in 1992, Joe Kinnear was in charge of Wimbledon, the so-called Crazy Gang, and one of the most unpredictable teams in English football. Known for their bruising, direct style and refusal to play by the book, Wimbledon had already shocked the world by winning the FA Cup in 1988. Kinnear stepped in as manager in 1992, and against all odds, he kept the magic alive. He guided Wimbledon to a 12th place finish in the inaugural Premier League season, an achievement that might not sound glamorous today, but for a club with no home stadium and one of the smallest budgets in the division, it was huge. Under Kinnear, they consistently punched above their weight. In fact, their highest Premier League finish came under his watch, 6th in 1993-94, in a year that Wimbledon finished above Liverpool, Spurs and Chelsea. Kinnear's Wimbledon sides were aggressive, street-smart and never afraid of a scrap. Players like Dean Holdsworth, Robbie Earle and Vinnie Jones thrived under his leadership. He remained at the helm until 1999, when health issues forced him to step down after suffering a heart attack. After recovering, he had a brief spell in charge of Luton Town, then disappeared from management for several years before making a surprise return with Nottingham Forest in 2004. That stint didn't go well. He was sacked after a short and turbulent tenure. Then came perhaps his most infamous chapter, his surprise appointment as Newcastle United manager in 2008. With a vast majority of fans disappointed in the club's ambition to appoint Kinnear, a manager who they regarded as not good enough for them even in his prime, let alone a decade later. It always seemed like it would go down in flames, and it did. A spell remembered for an explosive foul-mouthed rant at journalists, before upsetting Charles Nzogbia for his constant blunder of calling him Charles Insomnia. Kinnear stepped down due to heart conditions within months, and ultimately, the club would eventually be relegated. To everyone's surprise, he returned as director of football in 2013. The decisions were baffling, most famously for a heated radio interview in which he publicly mispronounced even more names, including saying Johan Kebab for Johan Kabaye and claiming in his previous spell he had signed players like Tim Krul, when in fact he hadn't. Although funny and odd at the time, sadly there may have been a reason for this. Health problems eventually forced him out of football again, and in his latter years Kinnear lived privately. In 2015, it was revealed he had been diagnosed with dementia, and his family have since shared his story to raise awareness. Sadly, in 2021, Kinnear passed away due to vascular dementia, with his family donating his brain for studies. Love him or loathe him, Joe Kinnear was never boring, a true character from a different era of English football.